Hi guys, my name is Kashish. I'm going to be talking about security defense. Um, Basically, the title of the talk is No One Left Behind, Security Defense Through Gamification, including CTFs. And the No One Left Behind principle is from the army or the military, where, if somebody is wounded or if somebody is not as strong as you are, you don't just leave them behind. You carry them to safety or as long as you can. So that's the basic idea. A bit about my background. I'm actually a security education engineer at Elevate Security. It's a startup based out of San Francisco. So the idea, guys might be wondering, what is a security education engineer? So you can break down the title into all its three components, and I primarily do all three of them. So I do internal security for our own product. What we are trying to build is security behavior change, a platform for that. So it involves a lot of components of security education and security awareness. And again, being a startup, I have to do a lot of coding myself. So, that engineering component. Before Elevate Security, I used to work for Duo Security. You guys had some talks from Duo before this. Scilab, which is a cybersecurity research group out of Pittsburgh, associated with CMU, Bank of America, and Deutsche Bank. And just a caveat from my end. So this is how I usually speak. You guys would have realized I have an Indian accent. I'm not, pretending to be Apu from The Simpsons, or there is no Raj from the Big Bang Theory joke coming. If you guys have trouble understanding anything, just feel free to raise your hand or something. I'll be happy to go over it again. So why should you guys listen to me, right? Like, I'm a guy standing up here talking about security education. So I have spent primarily the last 5 years of my life doing security. Even at CMU, both my degrees were primarily focused in security. I have personally undergone security training at more than 5 organizations that I've worked at. As I was mentioned by you, I'm a member of Played Parliament of Pawning, which is our CTF group out of CMU. So if any of you have played CTFs, you might have heard of us. We've been winning DEF CON for the past 2 years. A lot of the security that I learned, and especially practical security, was through playing and interacting with CTFs. So my understanding behind doing this whole talk and presented on this topic in other conferences was to help other people also break that barrier and enter into security. In our keynote yesterday, it was mentioned that we have a negative unemployment rate, and there are close to a million jobs left, and a lot of people in security, a lot of jobs in security that are unfulfilled. So basically, the idea is to get people who want to join security but are hesitant because of any number of reasons to cross that mental barrier, cross that skills difference that they feel, and be able to actually contribute. So let's start with some show of hands. So how many of you in this room have some sort of information security training at your current company? So it's primarily everyone except a couple of people who are playing on their phone, so that's fine. Okay, so a follow-up question. How many of you feel that the training gives your employees a fighting chance against a sophisticated attacker? Yeah, okay, so maybe one, and that is also iffy. So basically, that is the idea, that security training exists in pretty much every organization. In some organizations, it's a function of, when you get onboarded, you go through this course, or once a year you have a security review or something like that. But in our research, it's shown that it's very rarely effective against a proper attack, or if somebody is actively trying to hunt you down, even if it's things like phishing or smishing or wishing. A lot of the employees don't feel confident enough to defend against that. The other component that we want to address is this. So, being able to defend against an attacker or prevent yourself from causing a compromise is one component, but we want employees to feel that they make a positive contribution in the overall security posture. So I'll talk about more about what a positive contribution means, but basically the idea is that they should feel invested in security. So they shouldn't feel that security is somebody else's job, or I don't have to care about it. Even if I mess up, they have automated tools that will catch, or something like that. So that is the basic idea behind getting your employees onboarded with this concept. So yeah, as I mentioned, the objective is improving the security skills and behavior, and I've listed both of those words deliberately separately. So the idea is, you have skills and you have behavior, and both of them need to correspond here, of both technical and non-technical employees. This is something I can't stress upon enough. A lot of practical or defense through offense or CTF style has been discussed with developers, right? So there are companies who are starting to prototype this or discussing, making their developers actually break others' code or break their own code to learn. But most of the non-tech people, whether it be sales, finance, HR, any of these teams, they are never included in such practical activities. So the idea is to improve or use both of them. And again, coming back from the no one left behind principle. So even if like your developers are great and they write secure code, but somebody falls prey to phishing in your company, the problem is back to the same thing. So we have to take care of both technical and non-technical employees. Okay, so yeah, before we go into how we address this problem, let's look at what are some issues that we have in current security training. So this is the one that bothers me most. Basically, the idea is in almost all the companies that we looked at or reviewed, or the ones that I had personally been a part of, you have the same security training for all the employees. Sometimes, most of the times, there is like a security review or something like that at the start of when you get onboarded. So you have like an hour to do all the tests, or you look at some videos and go through multiple choice questions at the end. But it's never customized. They don't care what your role is, what your function at the company is. So I was looking at other training that happens at the company. So for example, you have sales training, or for an HR they might have some like people skills training. So there is no other training which they apply generically and uniformly to rest of the company. So for example, if there is a sales engineer and some of you are developers or security people, you don't get the same sales training as they do, right? So what sense does it make for us to give them or give everybody the same security training? So that is a concern. Now the other component of this is the customization needs to happen on a number of different levels. So if you take a step back, what is the role or what is the purpose of giving this security training? Or why do we onboard people with some sort of security review with relative to the company? So the idea there is that they should be able to perform their duties or their role or perform their function at the company for which they are being paid in a secure manner that doesn't hamper the overall security posture of the company. But they shouldn't feel afraid of being able to do something. So for example, if there is an HR person whose job is recruiting, they shouldn't feel scared before opening somebody's resume just because they might have macros enabled in that, because that is their job. If you're telling them that from today onwards you can never open an attachment, then you're restricting them from doing their own job. And there are a number of examples like this. So the customization here needs to happen on two different levels primarily. One is your job functionality. So whether you're in the sales team or whether you're in the recruiting team or whether you're in the finance team, you need to get training or appropriate guidance relative to that. So for example, one of the things that we would talk to a finance person is a W2 phishing possibility, because that is something that's very niche and very siloed to their job function. It's highly unlikely that some earlier candidate or somebody would spoof pretending to be an ex-employee and ask developers for credential access to whatever the HR system is. So that's one. The other part is what experience level or what knowledge of security you already bring to the table. So it's very likely that there are two different people working in the same job function, maybe having similar years of experience, but their security awareness levels are much different, just because of either interest in security or they worked for a security company before. So we have to take that into account before training them. If somebody already has a password manager installed and they understand what is the idea behind password managers and why we should use them, there is no point making them sit through the 10-15 minute training of what passwords are, how they are hacked, and why we should use password managers. So that's the other area of customization that the approach uses. The other thing is lack of motivation. So I've seen this a lot of times. Actually, before we do this, how many of you in the room are actually security professionals? So quite a lot of them. So I've seen this a lot of times in security. When some security product fails or when our approach fails, we tend to blame the users very easily, saying, they didn't understand it, or, maybe it was too tough for them, or, maybe they didn't care about it. What we have to understand is we have to appeal to their motivation, as I mentioned earlier, that they should feel a part or, ingrained in the process. Otherwise, again, we can keep making the best tool, or we can keep making the best policy. If the users are not on board with that, if they are not committed to, contributing to that policy, it doesn't work. So this is the thing that you should think about before dismissing any event or any breach or any cause of a security failure, as they were not able to do it. Please take a step back and think about, do they even care about it, or were they willing to invest that extra time in doing what we asked them to. The third issue is forget effectiveness. Even pre and post metrics of training are in most cases not measured. So this is a stat I picked up from McKinsey's research. It found out that less than half of the companies even bother to take any sort of feedback from their employees after a training as to how effective it was or what they learned, and less than 30%, or actually only 30% of them use any kind of metric. So it's basically, I chose a training program, I made my employees go through it, at the end of it, 70% of them don't care. So okay, it was a compliance checkbox. And this is the thing that I want to address here. Compliance and attendance are not measures of effectiveness. Just because everybody sat in the room, just like, there are a bunch of people in the room right now. But if, somebody is not paying attention, or my point is not coming across to them, their security awareness will not increase. The same thing is in the training. So you have to make sure that there is at least some sort of pre and post analytics that you're gathering, or some sort of feedback. It might even be a simple survey at the end of the session, where you leave a piece of paper and you just ask them if they learned something, whether they enjoyed it, whether they want to do it again, to get some sort of feedback on how effective the training actually was. And this is the last issue I want to cover. So it's all well and good to give them training, maybe do some refreshers, but their retention rates have to be high. So if you teach them about phishing today, they have to perform behavior, or their behavior needs to match whatever training or whatever policy you want for the rest of the year. So if they just learn about it and forget it in the next couple of weeks and don't care about it anymore, that doesn't really solve your problem long term. So you have to think about how the training can be more retentive, and I'll cover some ways which we've found to be more useful later. So the title of the talk says gamification, right? So let me try and address briefly what I mean by gamification and what elements of gamification we include in our approach. So basically gamification is just like you have some online game where you log in, you start at some level, you play, if you do well you get points, then you level up, at the end you might get like an award or a prize, or your character, on-screen character gets a bunch of goodies attached to it. So that's basically the format that we've adopted, and basically borrowed elements from that. So in our approach also there are like points and levels. So the more challenges that you solve, the more points you get. Beyond a certain discrete level, you level up. There is a very fun, engaging, puzzle-based format. So instead of being like, okay, do this, or the video showing this is how we prevent this, and then people skipping to the end and just answering the question, it's a more puzzle-based format where it's a lot more interactive, and you depend on user answers or replies from them to actually get them to the next stage. One other aspect of it that gamification provides is basically there's a lot of healthy competition, whether it be between members of the same team, or sometimes finance is competing with sales, or different silos within the company, because it basically becomes an online game where you're trying to get points and level up. Another activity that we've had is something that you guys can also organize, like a CTF night. So you have a lot of events, just order some beer or have some pizza and have them play it together. So what happens is, instead of them looking at it as, a compulsion or something that's enforced upon them. It's, appears to be more like a fun activity that they can do together. Again, there's a lot of collaboration that can take place, so that helps. And yeah, like prizes, who doesn't like to, win something? So that's the other element that helps here. We'll go into more into, what sorts of prizes we can share in a couple of slides. So for those who are not really familiar with CTFs, CTF is basically capture the flag. So there is there is a physical game which is, like actually played in the real world, where people actually put real flags in and across your geographical boundary, and you have to find clues and hints and actually capture those, leading to an ultimate thing. It sometimes is an egg or whatever you want to call. Sometimes it's a red flag signifying this is the thing. So this capture the flag competition is like an online representation of that physical game. As of today, it's mostly played by people who are already in security or people who are interested about security. So it's primarily like an infosec online competition. It's primarily web-based. You guys can log in using your devices and play challenges. So just like in the physical game, you look for clues, you look for flags. In CTFs, you look for strings like alphanumeric or encoded strings, which are basically called online flags. And every time you find the correct string, you earn points based on that. One thing to clarify here is a lot of people think CTF is offense, right? Like for them, both the terms are analogous, and that is definitely not the case. A lot of challenges, and increasingly over time, a lot of challenges have been focused on defense. So a lot of times, like in DEF CON or other competitions, you're actually defending other people from capturing your secret or other people from breaking in. So that's one thing I want to clarify here. There are different categories of challenges that exist today. So stuff like web, where you have some sort of web app, exploitation. It can include stuff like SQL injection, XSS, CSRF, stuff like that. Then there are crypto challenges, forensics, where you get like logs or network packet data and stuff like that, and a lot of other challenges. So basically, why they work as opposed to some other traditional security training is because they help you get practical skills. So I can tell you all about Caesar cipher, or if you're new to crypto, I can tell you about a new crypto primitive or an algorithm. But when you actually use it in practical sense, when you actually have to find a flaw in it, or when you have to find a flaw in its implementation, where maybe somebody was using RSA or something like that, which required the numbers to be prime, but they didn't understand that component, you get a lot more deeper insight into the algorithm as compared to if I would have just told you about it. Plus this, as I mentioned earlier, helps in the retentive part. So I have some metrics around that, which we'll go into later. Some of the CTFs that you guys would have heard of are like DEF CON CTF, Seesaw CTF out of New York. Google has its own CTF. PPP organizes this CTF called Plaid CTF. And there's Pico CTF, which I want to specifically talk about. So Pico CTF is the CTF catered towards high school students or even middle school students, but like people who are not yet in college. It's the world's largest hacking competition as far as we know. If any of you know something that's bigger, please let us know and we'll be happy to correct it. This year, more than 18,000 students participated in it. And some of the key learnings that we saw from this was, so as you can see on the screen, we basically gamified the CTF. So instead of just having like a command line interface based or like some text-based interface, we had this sort of puzzle online gamification module where they can go into different steps, and every step requires them to solve a particular security related challenge. So this worked excellently because our numbers grew exponentially from the previous few years. And the idea was, it seems intuitively obvious that a student who's primary or like a high school student who wants to play online games, if you're instead asking them to solve security puzzles, which is like in that black and white text format, they might not be as appealed. As compared to this looks more like a game to them. So that was the strategy that we wanted to adopt. So yeah, so we discussed some of the issues in security training that we have. So let's talk a bit about how CTFs address some of those issues. So number one, so we have customized content. As I described earlier, it's dependent on job function and level. A lot of times it also takes into account your previous existing knowledge and only gives you training for what you lack. So maybe the module of passwords is 30 minutes, of phishing is another 30 minutes, of malware is another 30 minutes, so on and so forth. But you will only get content relevant to what skills we think you need to add. And this happens with a simple pre-assessment. So, like you can have a 5-minute short quiz or something like that, which garners their interest. But again, be sure to look at their behavior and their skills. So it's all well and good for somebody to understand passwords and say, okay, yeah, I know how passwords are broken, but I just don't use password managers. Unless they're actually performing the behavior that you want, you can't really skip that module. So that's one. So I'll demo a couple of challenges that we created to give you guys an idea of what we're talking about. So I'll give you a minute to read through it. Good. Can I proceed? So some of you guys might have guessed it. Basically, the idea here is instead of just telling them, okay, you shouldn't use publicly available information in your passwords because somebody else can copy it or something, you actually make them simulate what an attacker could do. So firstly, they understand the other perspective or like the hacker's mindset of how they're going to compromise it. The other thing is it's a more subtle way of getting your point across. I have another challenge, which is usually a follow-up challenge of the first one. And sure you guys would have guessed it. Basically, the learning that we want them to take out of it is this. So the other thing is we discussed lack of motivation, right? This is a tricky area to get correct. And honestly speaking, there are no right answers or again, no one thing that I can tell you that will work for everyone. The idea is you have to get them invested and motivated. Whatever way you think works best for you, whatever way you think works well with your company policy, your security policy, feel free to adapt that. What I recommend personally is to use something which is known as positive reinforcement in psychology. So the idea there is, so let's look at what happens right now, right? In most of the cases, if somebody falls prey to a phishing attack or somebody downloads some malware and runs it, you perform negative reinforcement, right? So either the person is called out or they sent an email that you did this wrong or they have to go to some sort of additional security training or whatever, right? But very rarely are people actually awarded for doing something right. And that's basically the idea behind positive reinforcement. So if somebody does something right or if somebody exhibits a behavior that you want them to replicate or continue or extend in the future, you reward them. And that is what we recommend. Now, the advantage of gamification is because you're looking at so many analytics on what they did, how many phishing campaigns they caught and stuff like that. You can give them rewards on a number of things. One of the things that works best is like manager appreciation. So you can message their manager or automate this workflow that in their next one-on-one they get some sort of accolades from the manager saying, oh yeah, I found out that you reported this to the security team, or the security team wanted me to give you a thumbs up. That's one. If you guys have some sort of messenger or like some Slack channels that you guys use or HipChat or something like that, you can automate a message going there saying X, Y, and Z reported this phishing email, and you give them some Slack karma or points or whatever you want. Again, Slack badges is also something that we've heard people use, so that's another thing that works. Apart from that, you can give them swag. So this is the actual place where you can get really creative. Different employees at your company will care about different things. There have been examples that we've heard of people giving like the stuffed toys of fish representation. If like, their employees get, catch phishing emails, they also take them back if subsequently they fall prey to one. So you have to, maintain your game, or, always be on the top. Um, Other things include like, gift cards, like Amazon gift cards. So as I mentioned earlier, there is no one correct answer or no one thing that, will work for everyone. So this is your area to, find out more about what your employees care and actually give them that. Okay, so the other thing that we recommend you guys do is, because in this we are recommending CTFs, but whatever security training you do, definitely analyze the results of it. So, and when I say result, like try and understand the effectiveness of it, and whether it actually caused any difference in awareness or behavior of the employees before and after the training. Again, this can be done with CTFs. You have the advantage that this can be done on an individual level, a team level, or even like throughout the company. And that is something as security engineers you can actually take to your CISO or your C-level suite or upper management, saying, okay, we now have 40% less people clicking on phishing links, or in the past 3 months we saw only 2 untrusted executables being run. So stuff like that. So definitely have this before and after metrics and analysis of whatever security training you guys adopt. Again, we recommend CTF, security puzzles, whatever you want to call them. And this was the other thing I was referring to earlier in the talk. So when I told you guys about, why instead of just giving them one-way information either through video or text that you should do this, it's better to get more interaction from them or get some prompt from them. Because again, a lot of research has been done in this area, which is, there are significant results to prove that active learning is better than passive learning for retention. So instead of you just telling me one thing, if I go through the experience myself, it will last me a lot longer. Again, CTFs primarily, like even for security engineers, they rely on the learning by doing methodology. Instead of me telling you, what to do, I just make you do it, or you do it yourself, and then you learn as you are doing it, and plus it remains with you a lot longer. I touched on this briefly earlier, but CTFs help employees get into the attacker mindset, right? So they understand the picture from the other end, even if it's as simple as, copying or copy pasting a password that you found as a flag in some other fake profiles that we've created. But you basically simulate the experience of how somebody gets compromised passwords from, like the black market, and how they try and use them for different accounts that you have. And that understanding of, okay, this is what an attacker might do, triggers off a lot of other, wheels in their mind of, okay, if this can be done, then this else can be done. Should I have encryption on my device and stuff like that? So, getting them thinking about the other side is a good idea. Again, and then the natural follow-up for a lot of people is, okay, yeah, oh crap, like I'm vulnerable to this, or I can be compromised in this way. So how do I, defend against such things? So they might realize, okay, like if my password is compromised now, what should I do to, like, prevent this? So maybe they'll say, okay, maybe 2FA would help and stuff like this. Again, like, yeah, experiential and active learning stays for longer, is more retentive than passive learning. So that helps. There are some other ancillary benefits, which, as I mentioned in the pre-assessment, when you make them do challenges earlier, you can find out what level of security awareness they're already at, and, provide training accordingly. Again, if you're making them go through something that they already know, or like if they have password managers in the example I mentioned, you're wasting valuable dollars at that point. So there's no point in giving them redundant information that they're already bought on. The other thing is, this is a highly scalable model. So, other things that we've seen discussed are like stuff like tabletop exercises, or in-person meetings, or like a group meeting of like 5 or 10 people. But unfortunately, as your employees will scale, or as your companies will scale, these strategies don't scale as well. So earlier, if you had 50 people and you were having 5 meetings of 10 people each, when you have 100 people, you need to have 10 more. So in this case, it's linearly asking you for more time. But that's not the case with CTFs. You need to deploy these challenges, these puzzles once, configure them, and then every new employee or every other person you want to play with you want to have play the challenges can just run, and a lot of it can be automated on the back end. So it's not asking for as intensive time commitment from you. The other thing is, yeah, like maybe in a couple of years when you see that most of the company has realized what we wanted to tell, you can just add new challenges or remove the old ones. And again, the process is pretty simple. So it helps a lot with scale and maintaining the security training program that you want. The other thing is, because you're actively making them do something, you can train and measure their awareness simultaneously. So in the first pre-assessment, if you're, asking them to do a challenge on passwords or phishing or something, as you find out what they know or like how they work, you can, that component of it also helps them train. So it's like a 2-for-1 deal at this point. Yeah, so basically the key takeaways from my presentation, as we saw by show of hands, primarily everybody agreed that the current methods of security training and awareness are not great. Training needs to be customized in the sense of the word that I use to have maximum ROI. It's important to motivate your employees and have them, buy into your security culture and, make them feel as being part of the security team. Active and experiential learning can improve retention. So if that's something you also care about, try that instead of the passive techniques we have now. Whatever security training method you guys use, definitely measure the effectiveness of it. There's no point just rolling it out, checking a box on the compliance form saying, yeah, my employees had security training, and yeah, give CTFs or security puzzles a shot.
So you say in last bullet point, try CTFs, but
Yep.
do you have any recommended places where you can go and try them?
Yep. So
safely?
yeah. So depending on who in your company you want to have try, there are a lot of different areas. So if you want developers to try them, then there are some basic CTFs like Pico. 2013 is one resource I can point you to. If you want non-technical employees to do, so this is currently a product that I'm working on at Elevate Security. Hopefully, we already have some things in place. So if you're interested, we can talk later. But yeah, like there are things coming up in the market that you can now explore. Yep.
Are there any frameworks that you would recommend if you wanted to deploy your own CTF, kind of customized to your group that you'd recommend looking into?
Yep. So I built this at one of my previous employers, and we use this framework called CTFD. If I remember correctly, the person who made that, he had some association with Seesaw, or Seesaw used their framework. You'll find other frameworks like, I think Facebook or one of the big companies open source their platform, their framework that you can just, deploy challenges of. And honestly speaking, there are other sources available too. So if you have challenges, deploying them will not be, a big thing for you guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Looks like we're good. Cool. Thank you.